Swan's devotion specifically goes into what it's like to be a pastor. And this side of it, there's a lot of people that just don't know the financial aspects of leading a family, trying to have, a home, um, and receiving those funds to even do those things from a church by giving. It's actually kind of, I'm gonna be real with you, it actually is pretty nuts. It's a crazy way of actually living, but the call on a pastor basically is about preaching the gospel, and that's actually what we're here to do. And in doing so, I mean, really, you think about it, you live off of people giving to you, and that's a hard life if you are solely receiving your income from giving from a church. And I want to speak directly into this because I know what it's like on the one side where you receive giving from a church, and then I know the other side of where the service that you give to the church is actually done without compensation, and then the way and means in which you live are done by outside compensation. Okay, so you have a job outside of church and you work for free within a church. Okay, I've been on both sides of that. And my own personal conviction about this is pastors need to have an outside income. And this is not just, and I've said this before in other places, not just because of, the temptation within the ministry to just do ministry, because there's some people out there, and I've seen it before, who will sit back in a pool, who will go on vacation, who will not work, who will actually, especially if they're pastors, who will not put in time to do what the actual calling is, and will feed off of their congregants' giving without really actually doing ministry. I've seen that before, and it's terrible, because what it does is it brings us under reproach and as pastors, and it makes it so that we're just people who are freeloading off of others. And I personally have never liked that. And so when I was full-time in ministry, I worked my butt off because I wanted people to understand I'm not here to freeload. I'm here to actually to take care of some freaking business. That's what my call was. But people have different degrees of work ethic here, and you have to understand that, especially if you're a pastor, and especially in America right now. You can get your master's, you get your MDiv, you can go get your MAM or whatever, and the deal is the way the student loan industry and structure is made. It's made to put people into slavery, okay, so economic slavery. So what we do when we sign that paperwork, especially as pastors going through any one of the seminaries, we sign ourselves up for slavery. And so if we're not actually making more money than even with the debt that we're incurring, then basically we're doing it wrong. And I'm just being real with you, we're doing it wrong. And how that works out is that the pastor will end up being an individual who will be susceptible to temptation financially. So to get around that, and I've always suggested this, I suggest this with the team individuals who I work with. I won't get into that whole situation, but my suggestion was to be bivocational. And you as a pastor, some of you don't want to work. You want to actually just do ministry. And there's a desire here, what I understand, but in truth and reality, I mean, you've got biblical examples. I mean, you can go to Acts 18, you know the verses, you know what Paul says about working with his own hands and stuff, and what that actually meant to the first century to be a worker with your hands, and how lowly that actually was. And some people, they just don't want to do that. They actually just want to study the Bible. They just want to preach. That is it noble? It can be, but can it be used against the individual? Yes, it can. So how do you work around that? Well, you have to make the decision. If you complain about the debt that you're in, but you got yourself into debt because of trying to get into ministry, then you have to find a way to actually work out the debt while doing ministry. That's what my drive is here. If you can't pay the bills, then find a way to pay the bills. Don't complain about it. You just have you got yourself into the debt. And if you got yourself into the debt, then you need to take care of the debt. Get another job. Plain and simple. And it's not that hard to do, but it just means that you have to split your time up and be very direct about how that time actually works. If you're not willing to do that, but you're complaining about not having money, then the issue is not about the money, the issue is not about time, the issue is about your drive and about what you actually are here for. And if you do, you might be a person who's in ministry and you're like, well, I just want to receive from the church. Understand that you are susceptible to what could happen behind those in that church pulpit and behind those walls. And if you complain about it, nobody's there. It's nobody's fault but your own. I'm just being real with you. I'm just being very straight and direct. And if people don't agree with that, that's your prerogative. But I'm just telling you straight what happens. And because the folks who are part of the churches, they may not know that you don't have that drive. And the people who are part of the churches, they may not understand that there's a whole other aspect of this that has to be taken into account as a Christian minister. So I want to make sure I talked about that this morning and give you a little bit of insight into it. Take care.